Hello there everyone to my not review of Warhammer 40K Rogue Trader. The reason why it's not a review is because this game is massive. I'm about 40 hours in what seems to be an 80-hour plus game. Very similar to Owlcat's previous games in the Pathfinder series. There's a lot here. However, the game does launch here today by the time you're seeing this, so I wanted to go ahead and give my initial thoughts on it, and honestly, I don't really see all that much changing before I reach the end. I will end up finishing it and hopefully updating this by then, but I wanted to go ahead and give my initial idea of where I would rate this game as I'm currently at about 40 to 45 hours in. If that is too much for you and you feel like you need to go to another reviewer, totally understandable, no ill will here. These are just my first thoughts of the first half, though. I will also say that this game was provided for free by Uber PR, which is Owlcat's PR firm, and Owlcat. So thank you very much for providing the code to this. Important to get those disclosures out of the way. As I go through this review, I'm going to be showing 3 parts of the game, all of which happen relatively early on in the first 10 hours or so. There should be no story spoilers. However, I do understand if you don't want to see those. Totally get it. I just want to bring those up front right now. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and go to our first area that I wanted to show off, because I think it's going to focus on the environmental stuff that I really do love for this game. When it comes to 40k lore, I'm decently well versed in it, but when it comes to Rogue Trader itself, the tabletop RPG, never played it, never touched it, don't know the rules. So I went into this somewhat blind. I had an idea of what the world and the setting were, but I had no idea what the rules were going to be. So when they had all these extra skills and ways they interact, I can tell you right now my builds aren't optimal. That's going to be a discussion for the next section, though. I'm going to go ahead and talk about right here and about how awesome this is. Early in the game, you can run across a derelict ship floating in space. And this whole mission is kind of like a horror story almost. It's abandoned. You can see the light, the flickering lighting. There's a little bit of smoke effects billowing out. So that way it really does give the idea that something horrible happened here and the ship is just floating in space. I'm not going to go too far. I just want to kind of show everyone what the map looks like. You have a little bit of warp energy kind of wafting through the air. A couple of tentacles fading in and out as it's clearly a possessed ship of some kind. The environments that I've seen in this game so far have all been universally great. They really capture the vibe of 40k as a universe itself, down from very grandiose palaces that are run by the Imperium, down to just terrifying, claustrophobic, warp spawn terrors like this mission has full of. They've really embraced the look and aesthetic of 40k, and as loath as I'm to say grim dark, there's a lot of that in here. So visually, the game is definitely on point, or as on point as a CRPG can get. We are still dealing with, well, an old school role playing game from the 90s. Think earlier Baldur's Gate, not 3, but like Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, or Pillars of Eternity, the other Owlcat games, Pathfinder. You have an idea of what you're dealing with here. This looks very sharp and clean. The animations are a little jank. I did think I got better results playing through Pathfinder and Wrath of the Righteous, or Kingmaker and Wrath of the Righteous, rather. But they are solid enough. I think it falls in that weird uncanny valley where the writing and the dialogue is so, like, the voice acting is so good, I expect the character to kind of match that a little bit. But they're just far apart from each other. Unfortunate, but it is what it is. It's not a deal breaker for me, but that might be for you if you go into this. I'm not going to go too far into this area because I want everyone to just kind of see what the environments look like. The flickering lights, the little flashes of plasma coming out, the smoke. This is one of my favorite environments out there, and I just want to kind of highlight that for how the game looks. Where we're going to go right now is we're going to go into a battle. A little bit later on, but still within that first 10 hours or so of the game, if I can find the save I was going to use. Here we go. This is where my biggest complaint of the game comes in, unfortunately, and that is the combat. To be frank, the combat, I think it's boring. And that's a shame because I love your strategy games like XCOM or Front Mission. I've been a huge fan of turn-based, grid-based strategy games for a long time. And this has that movement point, action point system that you've seen in XCOM, but not a 2-point only kind of thing. Characters will have like 4 to 6 movement points that will get higher or lower depending on what you have, and a certain number of action points. Each skill takes a number of action points. And it is competent enough if it was simpler. However, it's way more complex than it might look. When you start with a fight, I'm going to take a sip of tea. Highly professional, so forgive me. When you start a fight, if you're not ambushed, you can place your characters wherever you want. So, or not wherever you want, within a limit of where they were standing when they were in. So you can put them behind cover if you want. You probably want your snipers in the backfield, your damage dealers up, your melee damage dealers up front. And then it's going to go. I'm not going to do any tactics here because what's the point? This is where the game kind of starts to drag on a little bit. You see this bar down by my head here? These are all the active skills that my tech priest can do. And they all affect everyone in different ways, and you're wanting to use them all every turn because a lot of them don't really have a cooldown, they just have an AP cost, and a lot of them are free. So, for example, him being an officer, at this point I believe he's a grand strategist, can start putting down buffing zones for everyone, which is going to improve where they're at, and he's get 3 separate ones of those. 2 for your party, 1 to debuff enemies. So, his turn, and I can move these every turn, by the way. His turn, the first part of it is just going to be me slapping down these different zones. And I haven't even used any of his AP yet. Cool. Now I have these other free ones like Expose Weakness, which I can use to debuff someone else. And then I have this right here, which is going to buff their weapons. And then we start getting to the points where I can actually start spending action points. I can buff, debuff, or I can just start attacking people. Let's just go ahead and take a sniper shot at him and go. Cool. Awesome. Killed that guy. That doesn't seem like a problem, right? That amount of skills down there gets bigger and bigger and bigger as the game goes on. And if you're playing on normal difficulty, you have to use them. So what starts happening is that long fights turn into a slog of just throwing down every single skill that a character has, because they get a lot of them for free, and you need to buff yourself up, and then debuff your enemies, and then move around here, and it is just a tedious process. This is where my lack of knowledge of the Rogue Trader tabletop game kind of screws me a little bit, because I don't know if that is how it played in the tabletop game, and they're just being super faithful in here. But in D&D, you'll have spells that you cast and they buff the party and they last like 6 rounds or something like that. Here, a lot of this is one use and you have to reapply it every single round, which takes what should be a very quick and easy encounter and stretches it about 5 times longer than it actually needs. It drags the game down so much. Furthermore, some of the tooltips on here are just terribly written. Now, in the case of this makes sense, right? You take a shot, 21 to 30 damage roll, armor pension 20, and it has some extra bonuses on top. That makes complete and total sense. However, in the case of like this one right here, look at that. Enemies suffer a -2 times intelligence bonus percent penalty to dodge for 1 plus intelligent bonus rounds. Just combine that into a number for me. Why do I have to go and do the math? What's more importantly is that intelligence bonus that this character has, it's not presented here anywhere. You actively have to go into this character to find what his intelligence is and then work the math out on your own. Now, I do believe that is an artifact of early access. They seem to be fixing that because on later playthroughs, I noticed more of these tooltips getting cleaned up a little bit more where it was just a flat damage. I just don't think, like, for example, this right here, move out of the way a little bit. You can see what it says 13, 10, and 10. It used to have that same gobbledygook there. So hopefully in time that gets patched to just tell you what it does. But that doesn't take away from the fact that combat is still a slog. I know some people are going to love it. I know the extremely heavily tactical-minded people are absolutely going to enjoy this combat. But for me, that interface needs to be a lot cleaner. A lot of these characters, you can see where they have like your buffs and debuffs on here. This can get very crowded very quickly. Furthermore, it can be a little confusing as to what skills do. I don't know if they're typos or just poorly written, but there are some, for example, there's a skill that lets you dash another 3 squares. But depending on who is next to you, they also get to dash, but they don't do anything. And the skill doesn't actually tell you that it spreads to other people. I figured this out completely on my own. Which adds to the confusing part about this turn tree right here. This is essentially the turn order tree where whoever's next on there gets to go. You're going to be bouncing around here in so many different directions, you'll actually forget where someone's current turn is supposed to be. So, I don't have a good example right here to show you, but what you can do is you can take, say, Pascal here and cast something that gets her to move again. And she'll move right now. So she'll move down here, but she'll still have her turn here. But her turn doesn't show up there. It actually comes down here until she takes the turn and then moves back up here. So it's hard to plan for the future, especially when all this stacks on top of each other. So, for example, let's say Pascal gives her a buff that makes her turn go to here. And then the next character here gives her a buff that makes her turn come up immediately after. So she'll shoot here, and then jump to here, and then jump back up to here. So that means that one character would have acted 3 separate times before the sniper gets to go. The problem? It doesn't show where they previously were. So you need to look at that chart, that tree there, and remember she acts right before your sniper does, because you're going to be moving her around, and there's no like ghost image or anything like that. So it can be very hard to plan out future attacks when you have so many skills moving people around, and you have so many skills in this game, and you get a lot of them. It's like a D&D book of the adventure books. You know how you just have a massive flow chart of skills they can take. The problem is, like I said earlier, you have to apply every single one of them every time, it feels like, and it's just a slog, and that really brings combat down, which is a shame because the lore is great, the writing is great, the voice acting is great, and the next thing I'm going to show you I think is probably my favorite part of the game, even though it's a little kind of almost a mini game. But the combat just drags the entire experience down. I said I got about 45 hours in this game. I would say about a third of that can be trimmed away just by streamlining the combat and making it where I don't have to look at 20 different things to get an idea of what I'm about to do. Just chop it down. Rather than having me apply a skill once every turn, let me apply a skill, give me a 3-turn cooldown, and let it buff my party for 2 turns. That might not be how the actual Rogue Trader tabletop is played, though. This could just be super faithful to it. That's just me as someone who has no experience with Rogue Trader, but knows 40k. Let me show you that third thing that I really enjoyed about this game, and that is the space combat. There is a Battlefleet Gothic style space combat in this game. I'm very much reminded of the army battles in Wrath of the Righteous, where it was kind of like a quasi-Heroes of Might and Magic fight, but it was more or less kind of a side thing that you still had to do. In this case, there is a space combat section, a Mass Effect style, go to your planet, scan stuff. But we're going to go ahead and go into this attack right here, so you can see what I'm talking about. The reason why I love it so much is because it reminds me a lot of playing Battlefleet Gothic, both the tabletop and the amazing RTS that you can find that's been out for a few years now. In that these are not quick and agile fighters. These are ponderous void ships that are crewed by tens of thousands of people. You don't turn on a dime. Physics is at play on here. So when you play these missions, right here is one where the ship's trying to get away and you have like 4 escort ships. You are forced to move. You can't just stand there because inertia, baby. It's a thing. So you have to move, and you can't just turn on a dime either. You have to come out and swing your ship around to line up your shots. And you do have to line up your shots. You have 2 broadsides. At least that's what I'm equipped with right now. He's out of range, so he actually has to kind of move a little bit closer to get in there. You have various weaponry you can equip on your ships. Of course, as you go on, you'll be getting bigger damaging guns, torpedoes that you can launch, which they move independently on their own, which is awesome. Your big forward prow. You can ram things, but this inertia, you actually have to think about where you're going in advance. I do love it. This is probably my favorite part of the game. There are a decent number of these throughout there. You can assign members of your party to stations, to crew stations on the ship. So, for example, Master Cannoneer or Master Navigator, and they bring their own skills that you can use to give you an edge in combat. This part's awesome, and I've had no issues with this at all. Overall, I really do like the game. I think it's excellent, but it is filled with bugs. At least it was at the time that I was playing, which is before launch. Admittedly, as I have gone back through and taken a look at some of this older gameplay, a lot of the stuff has been fixed when it comes to weird tooltip quirks. There were some issues of skill checks not properly reading right. That's frustrating as hell, but that seems to have been fixed as well. A lot of this stuff taken care of in a 0-day patch. That said, I review the game that I was given, not the game as it could be. So, caveat emptor in that case, I found a lot of bugs and a lot of tooltip errors. Hopefully they're fixed by the time you guys get on it. But my playthrough, that was a major, major detriment. Especially when you have things like combat being so... I'm loath to use the word complex, but overweight. And you're trying to play a guessing game with all this stuff as to actually what it does. That's an issue. That's a big, big strike against the game. Hopefully it does get cleared up when it comes out for. As far as the story goes, love it. I'm a 40K nerd to begin with. I love encountering all these races. They handle the ignorance of humanity very well, where you might know what something is, but your average citizen of the Empire is like, I have no idea what the hell that is. It's a mutant. Kill it. May or may not actually be in your beneficial idea. I will say there are kind of three paths you can go down. The dogmatic imperial, like purge the Xeno, kill the mutant kind of idea. The Robin Hood-esque, no, I work for the good of all, and we're going to have a happy little dominion down here. Or the heretical chaos follower, which of course is the path that I'm going down. I do wish the heretical options are a little bit less comically evil in some cases. Chaos is supposed to be a far, at least how I play Chaos, because I'm a Znichi boy, are supposed to be a more subtle influence. Corruption through little steps rather than just jumping into mass genocide. I wish they gave me options to be heretical a little bit more deviously, rather than look at me, I'm clearly the bad guy, but I'll take what I can get for right now. If I had to score this thing, and I hate scoring it, I would say, I'm not even going to score it, because I never use scores, but I would say if you're a fan of 40K, and you're a fan of the Pathfinder games that Outcast previously done, you're going to have no problem with this whatsoever. I'd recommend buying out the gate. If you like CRPGs like Pillars of Eternity, Wasteland, Baldur's Gate 3, I would also recommend picking it up, but understand, especially when compared to the juggernaut that is Baldur's Gate 3, you're talking about two completely separate beasts there. This is not going to be anywhere near the scope of that game was, but it is pretty solid. To everyone else, this is not what I would recommend as your first step into the genre. It is needlessly complex in some areas. I think that might be because they're trying to stay true to the actual Rogue Trader tabletop game, but unfortunately I have just no experience with playing a tabletop game. But my suspicion is that they're trying to be very, very committed to that experience. And sometimes tabletop does not translate well to video game. You have to make sacrifices. And I don't think Owlcat did in this case. I would not held this up as an exemplar of the first entry into that genre, just to be clear. I do like it, though. I'm enjoying my time with it. I'm absolutely going to be finishing it up, and I hope that this was helpful to you to kind of give you an idea of what my opinion of the game was within the first 45 hours or so. Once again, everything that I showed you was relatively early on, but I just wanted to give people an idea of what the beginning stages of the game were and the three biggest parts of it without really spoiling anything. The setting, which is awesome. The combat, which is way too below its throne good. And this little mini game here, which I just absolutely adore. I don't even want to call it a mini game, but it does take a backseat to the rest of everything else. Anyways, thank you all for showing up and watching this review. I am Stephen Brown with Game Points, and if you like what you saw here, you know what streamers want. Likes, bits, follows, shares, all that good stuff. I do stream over on Twitch TV/Game Points, various games, and I do hold a little podcast that I do every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So come on by and say hi. Once again, thank you for showing up, and until next game, I'm out of here.